He was crowned as a baby, ruled both England and France, and watched his kingdom crumble into civil war. But Henry VI's story didn't end with exile. It ended in silence, inside the dark stone walls of the Tower of London. Some say he died of grief, others say he was murdered. This is the chilling mystery behind the last moments of a lost king. Henry VI was born in 1421. He became King of England when he was just 9 months old, after his father, Henry V, died. Soon after, he was also declared King of France. 2 crowns for 1 baby. But Henry was not like his father. He was quiet, deeply religious, and didn't enjoy ruling. He preferred books and prayer over war and politics. As he grew older, his weakness became a problem. The nobles around him fought for power. The kingdom slipped into chaos. This chaos turned into civil war, what we now call the Wars of the Roses, between the houses of Lancaster, Henry's side, and York, his rivals. Henry suffered from a mental breakdown in 1453. He didn't speak or move for over a year. During that time, Richard, Duke of York, tried to take control. Even though Henry recovered for a while, he never truly ruled on his own again. His wife, Queen Margaret of Anjou, was strong-willed and tried to defend the crown for their son. But the Lancastrians kept losing battles. Eventually, Henry was captured and locked away in the Tower of London by Edward IV, the Yorkist king. Henry VI's reign had begun in hope, but was now sinking in blood and betrayal. Henry VI was not born for war. He was gentle, quiet, and deeply religious. But the times demanded a fighter, and the crown he wore became a target. By the 1450s, England was in deep trouble. The 100 Years' War with France had drained the kingdom's wealth. Powerful nobles argued constantly. People began to question the king's ability to lead. Henry's greatest weakness became clear in 1453. After Acre, hearing news of a terrible defeat in France, he suffered a complete mental breakdown. For over a year, Henry could not speak, recognize people, or make decisions. It was as if the king had disappeared. In his silence, Queen Margaret of Anjou stepped forward. Fierce, ambitious, and French-born, she ruled in his place and fought to protect their son's right to inherit the throne. But many in England distrusted her. They believed she was too proud, too foreign, and too hungry for power. This opened the door for Richard, Duke of York. A cousin to the king, York had royal blood and the support of many nobles. He believed he could run the kingdom better than Margaret. In 1455, the Wars of the Roses began. 2 powerful families, the Red Rose of Lancaster, Henry's house, and the White Rose of York, fought for control of England. For years, the kingdom was torn apart. Armies clashed across the countryside. Cities burned. Fathers fought against sons. At first, Henry's side held on, but with every year, York grew stronger. In 1461, after the brutal Battle of Towton, one of the bloodiest battles ever fought on English soil, Henry VI was defeated. The Duke of York's son, Edward, claimed the crown and became King Edward IV. Henry and Margaret fled. They hid in remote castles and crossed into Scotland. For a time, they became ghosts, wandering royalty without a throne. But Margaret was not done. She gathered forces, plotted returns, and never stopped believing that their son, Edward of Westminster, should rule. Henry, meanwhile, drifted in and out of sanity, sometimes unaware of the world around him. The crown that once sat gently on Henry's head had now turned to iron, and England was not finished bleeding. By the late 1460s, England was still restless. Though Edward IV had taken the crown from Henry VI, peace was not yet won. The throne was balanced on a blade, and every noble had a sois, Bardi. In 1470, a shocking twist changed everything. Richard Neville, the powerful Earl of Warwick, once Edward IV's greatest ally, turned against him. Warwick had helped Edward rise, but now felt betrayed and ignored. Angry and ambitious, he switched sides. He joined forces with Queen Margaret and brought Henry VI back from exile. Henry was led through the streets of London once more. His crown returned, but he was not the same man. He smiled softly, waved to crowds, but spoke little. His mind, damaged by years of war and sorrow, remained far away. Behind the scenes, Warwick and Margaret were the true rulers, planning to crush Edward IV for good. But Edward was not done. From exile in Burgundy, he gathered an army, crossed the Channel, and marched through England. Many rallied to his side. He was young, bold, and determined to reclaim his crown. The showdown came in April 1471, at the Battle of Barnet. In thick fog, Warwick's army clashed with Edward's. Confusion spread. Mistaken identities led to chaos. Warwick's forces turned on each other, and by the end he was dead, killed while trying to flee the field. Queen Margaret arrived in England too late, but still, she fought on. With her teenage son, Edward of Westminster, She led what was left of the Lancastrian army toward Tewkesbury. On May 4th, 1471, the battle began. Edward IV crushed them. Young Edward of Westminster was killed in the fight, the only Prince of Wales ever to die in battle. Queen Margaret was captured. Her dreams were shattered. With her army broken and her son dead, there was only one Lancastrian left with a claim to the throne, Henry VI, and he was sitting alone in the Tower of London. After the bloody defeat at Tewkesbury, the Lancastrian cause lay in ruins. Queen Margaret was captured. Her son, Prince Edward of Westminster, the last real hope of her house, was dead. Only one man remained, the king who had once ruled England with a quiet heart and a brow, ken mind. Henry VI, the last true Lancastrian, now sat alone in the Tower of London. He had been there before, many times in fact. The tower had become more than just a prison. It was a symbol of everything Henry had lost: his crown, his son, and his mind. The people of London whispered about him. Some said he wandered his cold stone chamber in silence, praying and weeping. Others claimed he spoke to ghosts, seeing visions of saints and martyrs. Once gentle and kind, now he seemed lost in a world no one else could reach. The war had not just taken his kingdom, it had shattered his soul. Every morning the guards would bring him food and step back quickly. Sometimes he would eat. Sometimes he would sit by the window for hours, staring out at a city that no longer belonged to him. There were no visitors, no allies left. Only Edward IV ruled now. Still, rumors spread like fire in the streets. Some said Henry would be pardoned. Others believed he would be sent into exile. A few feared something darker, a quiet death, to ensure no future rebellion could ever rise in his name. Even the stars above the tower seemed to dim. In secret corners of the city, loyal Lancastrians lit candles and prayed for him. They remembered the boy king who once united England and France, and the gentle man who hated war but had been swallowed by it. But Edward IV was no fool. He knew as long as Henry lived, his throne would never be safe. Rebellions could still rise. Plots could still be born. And so, while Henry knelt in prayer in the tower's chapel, the gears of final justice, or vengeance, began to turn. The king was still alive, but not for much longer. On the night of May 21st, 1471, the Tower of London was cloaked in silence. The stars were hidden behind heavy clouds, and the cold wind whispered through the stone corridors. Deep within the fortress, King Henry VI knelt alone in prayer. He had no visitors. No guards stood nearby. Only shadows kept him company. That night, the bells did not ring. The city outside slept, unaware that something final was about to happen within the tower walls. No one saw the killer enter. No one heard a scream. But by morning, Henry VI was dead. The official account claimed he died of melancholy, a broken heart after hearing of his son's death. But no one believed that. Not really. Henry had lived through years of loss. He had suffered humiliation, betrayal, and exile. He had been a king without a crown, a husband without a wife, and a father without a son. And still, he endured. But now, with Edward IV securely on the throne, Henry's life no longer served a purpose. His death, however, did. Many historians believe that Richard, Duke of Gloucester, the king's younger brother, who would later become Richard III, carried out the murder himself, or gave the order. The act was cold, calculated, and clean. No wounds, no witnesses, just silence. Later that day, Henry's body was displayed at St. Paul's Cathedral. His face was calm, they said, his lips closed in prayer. But some swore they saw blood trickling from his nose, a sign of violence, a sign of murder. The people of London mourned quietly. Many wept. Others watched in fear. They knew now what kind of king Edward IV was willing to become. With Henry gone, the House of Lancaster was finished. The Wars of the Roses would rumble on. But this chapter, the long, tragic story of a king who never truly ruled, had ended in the dark. No crown, no ceremony, just a dagger in the shadows. The death of Henry VI didn't just end a life, it buried a legacy. But in the shadows of his quiet murder, something strange began to happen. People whispered that Henry had been a saint. Others said his blood had healing powers. In the years that followed, pilgrims began visiting his resting place at Chertsey Abbey, and later at Windsor Castle. They claimed miracles happened where he was buried. Sick people said they were cured. Blind people said they could see again. A king who was weak in life suddenly became powerful in death. The church even considered making him a saint. For some, Henry was now a symbol of suffering and faith. A king who had been destroyed by war, but who never stopped praying. A king who never fought back, but still held on to hope. But others didn't want his memory honored. King Edward IV did everything he could to erase Henry's legacy. He spread the story that Henry had simply died of sadness, that no one was to blame. The truth? Hidden, forgotten, buried with the body. Then came a twist. Years later, a new king rose from the ashes of war. Henry VII, the first Tudor. He was married to Elizabeth of York, uniting the houses of Lancaster and York. He needed a symbol to show he was the rightful king. So what did he do? He brought back the story of Henry VI. He called him a martyr. He painted him as a gentle, holy king, one who had suffered for England. Suddenly, the man who had once been seen as weak and useless became the spiritual father of a new dynasty. Portraits of Henry VI were made. Prayers were written in his name. His story was polished and purified, but the truth still hung in the air. He was murdered, alone, unarmed, by the very people who feared what his name still meant. And though the Wars of the Roses ended and a new age began, the ghost of Henry VI never really left. And so, in the quiet shadows of the tower, the life of King Henry VI came to an end, not with a battle, but with a whisper. Was he a broken king, or a victim of power and fear? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if stories like this intrigue you, explore more forgotten truths in our crimes playlist. Thanks for watching, and remember, history may fade, but the truth always leaves a trace.